Yuji is a feared underworld assassin who decides to go to a normal school now that his master has passed away. His handler and principal, Chizuru, informed him that due to his special circumstance, his school would only have 5 other students, each with circumstances of their own. She hands him over to the first student, Sachi, the class rep who always does what she's told, going as far as dressing up as a maid. Next, he runs into Amane, who seems to be hiding something from her past, and Makina, a younger student who's impossibly timid. When he heads to class, he finds Mishiru, a try-hard tsundere and fake blonde, which Yuji spots from a mile away. But for some reason, Mishiru denies it. Later, class begins, but when Shizuku asks where the last student, Yumiko, is, the girls say she's been skipping class lately. Yuji finds her after class to introduce himself, so she immediately pulls a knife on him, but he stops her instead. After classes are done for the day, he returns to his room to find Amane with her bare plots out. She claims she was already used to changing in that room, and Yuji doesn't seem to mind, even complimenting her snow cones. Surprised by his reaction, Amane asks if he has an older sister, so Yuji says he did, but she's dead now. When Amane hears his sister's name, she grows silent and leaves, but outside the door she remembers gory images from her past and says she's finally found him. The next day, Yuji finds Makina feeding some fish and bonds with her over how to get a crawfish to change color, making Makina come out of her own shell. But while he succeeds in that department, Yumiko tries over and over again to stab him. When that doesn't work, she approaches Chizuru, warning her that the girls could be in danger, but Chizuru assures her they're fine. Yumiko tries to find dirt on Yuji, but she can't seem to find anything of substance. So she resorts to the knife again, though she only ends up in a faceplant. Later, a blonde woman named JB pulls up to see how Yuji's doing with his new school. When Yuji returns to class, Amane demands to know if that was his girlfriend, so Yuji says she's like his guarantor, and he doesn't have any girlfriend. After class, Yuji gets sneak attacked by Yumiko again, so he tells her to quit it already and observe her for herself, so they call a truce. The next day, Yuji finds Amane breaking into his room again, so he decides to watch closely but only discovers that she's about to do a self-workout on his bed. Later, Yuji finds Mishiru with a stray cat, but when she notices him, she acts like it's bothering her and asks for help getting rid of it. But when she does, she looks kinda sad. Afterward, they head inside and bump into Sachi, but when she opens her mouth, Yuji spaces out, leaving his body on autopilot. After, he discovers that he's agreed to wear a hideous pouch she made, so Mishiru suddenly takes charge and dumps it on Makina. Yuji thanks her for the save, but suddenly, Mishiru has no idea what he's talking about. Later, Yuji finds Mishiru sitting at the side of a cliff with a stray cat, so he keeps her company, while she strangely says that she'd like to be buried there when she dies. That night, the other students gather round and agree that sometimes Mishiru acts like she's a different person, suspecting she may be an alien. The next day, Yuji finds her at the cliff again, but something about her seems off again. She suddenly says she wonders what it's like to kiss, and uses Yuji as her test run. However, just moments later, she jumps back in surprise, wondering why Yuji almost kissed her. Later in school, Mishiru pretends to remember what happened, but when Yuji tries to show it to her, she runs off embarrassed. While she sulks, the cat tries to warm up to her, but she accidentally scares it away. Later, she searches high and low for it, and Yuji offers to look too. But they find it injured on the ground. They get in the car, hoping to get it to the vet, but it dies right in Mishiru's arms as she sobs. The next day, Mishiru is suddenly back to normal, so Yuji confronts her about not being the Mishiru she knows, and she finally admits it. Later, Yuji forces the real Mishiru to come out, and when he asks her what she wants, she says she wants to die. He tells her he'll make it happen and buries her alive. It turns out the real Mishiru had a best friend back in middle school. However, one day, her best friend threw herself off a building, causing Mishiru to have a heart attack herself. Her friend's heart was transplanted into her body, and somehow their souls were both sharing a body. However, Mishiru finally realizes she wants to live for herself and crawls out of the hole with Yuji's help. She determines to enjoy the life she'd been giving, and the two souls continue to coexist happily in the body. Days later, Yumiko's dad approaches JB, telling her he wants Yumiko to join one of his business groups, and plans to scare her into agreeing using Yuji. Yuji is informed that his mission is to follow Yumiko till some men ambush them and beat him up. However, when they do, Yuji abandons the plan and beats them up instead. Later, Yumiko tells him how her father had always wanted a male heir. He was so desperate that he eventually had one with a mistress, causing Yumiko's mother to unalive herself. Fortunately, the mistress's son also died, so her father just accepted his second-rate daughter instead. Yumiko couldn't take it anymore and attacked another student, so her dad pulled her out and built Mihama Academy just for her. Now, because Yuji broke the deal, her dad insisted Yumiko be moved to an American school, or else Yuji would be expelled. However, Yumiko refused his terms and asked to speak with him directly. When he showed up, Yumiko pulled a grenade right in front of him and blew herself up, leaving her father crying over her unrecognizable body. After her funeral, Yuji hands him Yumiko's last request to keep the school open, and he ends up confessing that he was proud of his daughter, while the real Yumiko listens from close by. After, the girls welcome her back and JB tells her she can now live freely. Days later, the students relax in front of some TV when Makina mindlessly tells Sachi that they should be the kind of girls who can count to 10,000 in the bath. Sachi takes this as an order and attempts to do just that, but ends up almost drowning in the bath. While she rests from that foolish stunt, Yuji hears her call him Yun-kun, which sounds very familiar. He heads to his old neighborhood, where he remembers once playing with a girl who called him Yu-kun. Back at school, Chizuru announces an upcoming test which makes Machiru nervous, so she jokingly tells Sachi to get rid of the test. Sachi then locks herself away, working on something while Yumiko tells Yuji about the story of a girl who once set her class on fire to stop a test. The night before the test, Sachi lies in the classroom with explosives, but Yuji manages to stop her before she does something stupid. This is when Sachi reminds him that they used to play together when they were little. Sachi's parents had neglected her, but she found comfort in Yuji, who looked like he was just as miserable, until he stopped showing up. One day she ran away from home, and when her parents finally found her, they got hit by the menace Truck-kun, causing her mom to slip into a coma, and her dad to pass away. Since then, she thought she could make up for it by always doing as she was told, but Yuji assures her that it's okay to be a little selfish sometimes. Sachi finally has the courage to visit her mom and move on. The next day, Makina asks for Yuji to be her dad, and Yuji surprisingly accepts, even teaching her some of his skills. He eventually learns that Makina is from a family of politicians, and she was their family heir till she was kidnapped, and her dad died trying to save her. This caused her to develop a mental illness, which meant she was no longer fit to be their heir. Later, the school goes on a break, so Makina heads into town, only to notice her little sister nearby. She decides to walk away entirely, but the car explodes, knocking Makina over too. Thankfully, Makina was barely injured, but by no means out of the woods. JB calls Yuji in for a meeting and shows him that their next target is to be Makina. Because of this, Yuji plans to take Makina into hiding, so the girls say goodbye, and Sachi hands her a potted plant for hope. Yuji and Makina head into town, and there JB tells him that her family is behind the hit. Apparently, Makina has a prodigious memory and happened to memorize the documents, proving her family's corruption. Makina had threatened to expose her mom if she didn't protect her little sister, causing a hit to be placed on her. JB warns Yuji that protecting her is pointless, but Yuji says he'll do whatever it takes. Later, Yuji and Makina hide out while Yuji makes preparations, and JB's organization tries to find them. They eventually pin them to a location, but when they move in to capture them, the apartment explodes and Yuji makes away with their van. Later, Makina realizes she forgot the potted plant and goes back for it, but she's ambushed by some agents and shot in the back. Yuji takes them down and tries to carry her to a hospital, but JB stops him and tells him to hand her over. Later, JB discusses with Makina's mom about using some of Makina's organs to replace her sister who's in a coma. However, when she returns to her office, Yuji sneaks in and eliminates her. When Makina recovers, she finally heads back to the academy where everyone welcomes her. When Yuji returns to his room, he finds Amane waiting for him, insisting on being his girlfriend. He warns her it'll be mostly one-sided, but she agrees anyway. Yuji doesn't buy the act, so he asks her why she's doing this, and she finally tells him the truth about his sister, Kazaki. 6 years ago, Amane and the rest of the basketball team had been returning to school when their bus accidentally drove off a cliff. Amane had smashed into Kazaki, and that was the first time they spoke to each other. The girls climbed out of the truck, some wounded, some traumatized, while Mr. Ochi was unconscious. Kazaki gave all of the wounded first aid. Then the instructor woke up, and the students set up camp for the night. Initially, the girls tried what they could, like searching for reception and rationing food, but as the days went on, everyone slowly started losing hope. Amane broke down, saying she just wanted to go home, so Kazuki promised to get her out alive. On the 9th day since the accident, Mr. Ochi carried half of their remaining food, hoping to find help. The girls got hungrier and hungrier, and Kazuki could tell that the injuries were only getting worse. By the 11th day, some were turning delirious, and they were eating bugs and weeds to survive by day while suffering through diarrhea at night. On the 12th day, one of the students lost her dog, and the girls all agreed that they'd have to eat it. Kazaki did the dirty work of cutting it up and preparing it, and though they hated themselves for doing it, they wept with joy from the nourishment. By the 14th day, Amane had reached her utmost limit with hunger, so Kazari told her about her little brother to distract her. Suddenly, Mr. Ochi appeared alone and delirious, meaning his mission had also failed. Before long, the injured students started dying, and Mr. Ochi was tasked with burying them. One day, the students started passing around bowls of meat, saying Mr. Ochi had killed a deer. But Kazaki refused to eat any bit of it, saying she could get sick. Out of loyalty, Amane didn't eat of it either. Then that night, Kazaki woke her up and said they had to leave camp. She showed her Mr. Ochi going at it with one of the other students, but when Amane took a closer look, she saw the remains of the departed students had been cut up and used as meat. Unfortunately, Kazaki and Amane were discovered, so Kazaki sacrificed herself by staying behind while Amane ran away. She miraculously made it to a road and was saved, but everyone thought it was strange that only she survived. Haunted by the deaths of her classmates, Amane was desperately looking for a reason to live, and she found one when she met Yuji. Yuji realized she needed time to heal on her own and agreed to let her live for him until then. After, they decided to head back to the site of the accident, looking for clues that Kazaki might have survived. On the way, a man stopped them and called himself a huge fan of Amane, then suddenly left. Yuji and Amane return to the forest, and Amane uses the last paper Kazaki left for her to guide them to a spot to the ground. When they dig it up, they discover a note left by Kazaki telling her what happened after her escape. Apparently, everyone died from the same skin disease one of the injured girls had before she died. Kazaki then tells Amane to find her little brother and protect him. The letter doesn't say what happened to Kazaki herself, but Amane got a bit of closure. However, on the way back, she gets a call from the man they met earlier who's currently holding the girls hostage. The man turns out to be one of the parents of the dead students, upset that Amane got to live. Yuji calls JB and all her forces to surround the school, but they can't act carelessly. Yuji comes up with a plan to get the man into the bathroom so he can snipe him from a tower 900 meters away with a 10-centimeter field of fire. Yuji assures them he can do it, so Amane heads in with bottles of water, tricking the man into drinking some. And later, when he has to use the bathroom, Yuji sees his chance and takes him out. After the rest of JB's team storms in to take care of the rest, and the students are once again safe. When Yuji returns, everyone is glad to have him back and hugs him. If you want to know all about Yuji's crazy past, comment you have a new mission down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next video.